When a man who makes $450 an hour wants to tell you something for free, you should listen. I'm John Renton with the retro review of The War of the Roses from 1989. Based on a novel by Warren Adler, this adaptation was done by Michael Leeson, who's done television, a few film projects, and created The Cosby Show, so it's his fault. You goddamn bastard. Well, he's dead, so I can't really say anything else, but nevertheless, it was his fault. That being said, this was directed by and stars Danny DeVito. That's right, the man that has had quite the eclectic career, that played Oswald Cobblepot and really just is a fantastic fucking comedic talent. He directed this almost horror movie style. If you have not seen The War of the Roses, here is the base premise. You have a very, very happy couple, seemingly that is, Oliver and Barbara Rose, played by Michael Douglas, and Kathleen Turner, who, Jesus, Kathleen Turner in her prime. My word, my word. Anyway, they're a happy couple. They've been married for a bunch of years. They have two children, while the older versions are played by Heather Fairfield and Sean Astin, who was the same height as Danny DeVito at this point and still is. Har har. And basically things start to unravel because as they become more successful, Oliver and Barbara, that is, well, let's just say things start to get divisive. Little barbs are thrown, ironically. And Barbara, picked a house and she feels that the house is really hers. And Oliver is trying to become partner at a law firm and doing really well and everything. And even though they're both successful, Barbara wants more. Barbara eventually wants to leave Oliver. And then divorce proceedings and hilarity ensues. Very, very dark, comedic, divorce proceedings and kind of crazy scenarios as they get a little bit more unhinged, especially in the third act. And that's really about your spoiler-free premise right there. This movie, by the way, is a number of years old, so from here on out, it is going to be all spoilers. And the reason I decided to watch this is because The Roses with Benedict Cumberbatch, Stop Laughing, this is serious, and Olivia Colman is coming out mere hours after I'm going to be posting this. And I decided, I've never actually seen all of The War of the Roses. I've seen a little bit. And Danny DeVito actually proved himself to be a pretty damn, more than competent director with how he shot this. And it cost $26 million, which would be $67.7 million in today's money. $9.4 million opening, $24.4 million in today's money, $86.8 million in the U.S. That's a pretty goddamn big haul. This is before they realized Michael Douglas was one of the lizard people, and that would be $226.1 million in today's money, and $160.8 million worldwide, which would be $417 million in today's money. So, whose house? Well, it's going to be someone's house, or it's going to be no one's house because it's going to be a divided by divorce house. So, we basically get the bridge of the story with Gavin, played by Danny DeVito, who's going to offer a man some advice. He's a divorce attorney, and he does, work in association with Oliver, like they work for the same firm. They know each other, basically, is what I should say. And we see that he's going to tell him a story. There's like a little bit of a scene where it looks like Barbara is hating on Danny DeVito. It would be hard to resist Kathleen Turner, especially in 1989. And how did Oliver and Barbara meet? They met over an auction for a book that apparently is worth a lot of money. I noted a few times, was it cold enough on set for Kathleen? Not that I was complaining. But they do have a whirlwind romance, and things are going great. They have an apartment, because we're kind of moving a bit quickly. I do want to say I almost wish they would have done a little more building of like how they came to be and stuff like that, but I guess they had to get to the meat of the matter. And I'm not saying this movie necessarily should have been any longer, but there are certain things they could have cut and other things they could have included to make the runtime just fine. Because it's not a perfect movie. It does have a few pacing issues, and there are a few moments where even though they're unhinged, it's like, okay, I could have done without that, even though I get why they went that route. She works as a waitress. She wants more. And they decide to get a car together, which is a very, very nice car. It's called a Morgan. And not a Captain Morgan. We're not drinking here, even though I think there was some drinking on set. Probably copious amounts given some of the scenarios created. And we see what looks like a relationship between Gavin and a woman named Elke, who's Rika Hoffman, who's very tall, but then again, next to Danny DeVito, she just has to be able to see over the second shelf, and she'd be taller than him. And we do get little jabs between Oliver and Barbara, where she's trying to tell a story, and she kind of stumbles a little bit telling a story about it was some trip to Europe that they had, and then it starts to unravel from there, basically. Now, any marriage is going to go through strife and issues, and Barbara basically, as things are going, I think part of the reason that things were starting to unravel a little bit is because even though they had a nice dinner with some of his lawyer friends and stuff like that, he was trying to impress them. And in the process, he was kind of pushing his wife's feelings to the side, which is not necessarily something you want to do, especially when you have Kathleen fucking Turner with you. But Barbara has been trying to leave notes on houses saying, hey, if you're interested, I'd like to buy this house. So she tries to do that with a very, very nice, lavish house and ends up at the funeral of the daughter, or funeral of the mother, where the daughter basically says, oh, she had a lot of friends, some that she doesn't know, and she's just looking to get rid of the house, and conveniently, Barbara just happened to show up and they get the house. I mean, it's silly, but it's fun. And just because of a loss of love, it worked out perfectly. They were able to get the house. Barbara was stressed, even though this was a dream house of hers, labor of love, putting all this stuff together, perfectly flooring, all that. And at one point, basically, Oliver decides to get her some hired help. A nanny, Susan, Marina Sagebrecht, who actually has a pretty funny role in this. Barbara feels underappreciated, and that naturally, as any wife would. The kids come home for Christmas, and, because at first they were little kids, and then they grew up to be bigger kids, as most kids do. Mostly kind of, let's just move on. Unless you're Jack Jr. or, a couple of the Von Erichs. Let's just move on from that. And, things start to really get a little bit bad. There is an orange and white kitty that, unfortunately, they don't show it getting run over, but it is run over in the movie. It's played for a sight gag, but I had to go pet my cat after that because I don't like animal violence. There's also a pooch. That's fine, by the way. There's an implication that the pooch is being fed to Michael Douglas, but no, that actually wasn't the case. And all through this, Danny DeVito's Gavin is telling the story to this guy and everything. It sounds like a typical, divorce story, but no, it gets worse. And then Oliver starts to have some issues. It feels like he's having angina or like some kind of heart attack and everything. It just turns out to be an esophageal tear or an issue from stress, spicy food, stuff like that. I've had esophageal stuff, as you can plainly tell, from illnesses and stuff like that, and from eating spicy food, which you need to kind of negate that. And she didn't go see him at the hospital because she talked to the nurse, and the nurse said he would be fine. That pretty much led to the unraveling here of this relationship. She didn't think that he was going to die. She was going to drive to the hospital and everything, and she had her own car. Big old SUV. It was like a monster truck thing. More on that in a bit. But she got on the freeway and she started to have a bit of a panic attack that turned into an attack, realizing that, hey, wait a second, I would be happier if he was dead. Kind of a sudden shift, in all honesty, even though he was kind of rude at the dinner. But damn. But now she's unhappy. And basically she wants a house because she felt that she put her love into it. Even though she spent a lot of his money, she also has a catering business that she got based on the suggestion of her friend, who said she was making really good pate. So there's that. And I noted that, it might be Gavin and Barbara. Mind you, I have not seen all of this, so Wasn't totally sure, but Gavin's telling the story as things go on. Actually, it turns out to be Gavin and Susan actually got together, fitting because they're both about the same height. I'll stop making height jokes one of these days, except I won't because it's not like they can reach me. And the idea now is there's a law basically that says basically they could live under the same roof. So now they're going to just, not interact with each other, except it's Christmas time again. So now they are, but things get a little bit more unhinged. There's electrical issues. The tree catches fire while the daughter is making out with her boyfriend in the car. And he uses the extinguisher, Michael Douglas does, and puts out the fire and everything. Oh, thank God I was here. And he comes up with a figure basically, like after Susan's salary and this kind of stuff and everything. Oh, Susan's done a lot, so I tripled her salary that she gets. And I'm willing to give you, Barbara, $490,633 if you give me the house. She's not going to give up the house. I don't blame her for not taking the house, but $490,000 would be about $1 million. Million just over, actually, probably about 1.2 million almost. And as their arguments increase, I did note that that Susan and the kids came back and had those old Safeway bags. My God, I remember those. That's back when you could get groceries for a reasonable price. But nevertheless, enough about that. They're going to divide the house up with neutral sections and sections that belong to each other. And there's no way to win this, Oliver. There's only degrees of losing. See, they keep implying that Gavin might actually be with Barbara, but he refuses Barbara's advances. This is after the cat gets run over, which they don't show, thankfully. And I'm like, oh, kitty. That cat looked really old, by the way. I mean, really old. So, there are insults that are said between the couple. One that I will not repeat because it's the gay slur, one of the gay slurs. And Susan goes out to find work because basically they're finally getting rid of, they're finally moving on with these divorce proceedings. And Gavin basically tells Oliver, you gotta be prepared to possibly give up the house, this kind of stuff and everything, and this isn't gonna work. And he tells Gavin that he's fired, which it's like, okay, he's trying to warn you that this isn't gonna work. Basically, it escalates to where things turn really violent and everything and really dark in the last half. There's a dinner that implies that, oh no, they're gonna, that she cooked the dog and put it in the pate. She didn't. There was a point where, Kathleen Turner fell down some stairs. And thankfully, again, the dog is okay. Then they end up basically getting in a fight. There's some mouse traps in the goddamn attic. They're going through all this fighting. At one point, he pins her down. And it looks like they're going to do something. It looks like they're going to have just this last hot, steamy, go around, but then she bites his dick. Again, gets pretty they shoot up from it, but still. And Susan comes back for her things, but that doesn't really end up working out. They end up on the chandelier, Kathleen and Michael, that is, and they're having kind of a discussion, a little bit like, as much as they can. Because she's on the chandelier wondering how she's going to get down. He decides to get on the chandelier to rescue her, not realizing the way the chandelier is going. It's kind of like the opening or the front room of the house in Paranormal Activity 4, if you know what I'm talking about. An older version of that, but still. And then they both crash to the goddamn ground while Susan and Gavin are watching outside. And they're both alive briefly, but they end up dying by, within a little bit, but almost holding hands, but whatever. And what's the moral, Gavin says? Well, who knows what the moral is. Now, what I can do is I can give you this advice, or you can go home and try to find a shred of what made your marriage work. And then he gets a call from his wife, Susan, and decides to go home to her. And there you go. That is the end of the War of the Roses. Yeah, Michael Douglas died. Lizards don't live that long, I guess. And Kathleen is still alive, apparently. I'm surprised Michael Douglas is still alive because he looked like he was about 80 in this movie. But nevertheless, it's a fun movie. I mean, it's not necessarily the greatest thing on earth, but it's something that mostly holds up. There's this and Death Becomes Her. They get the horror black comedy thing right, even though that's much more horror based than this. This is just shot like a horror movie. But yeah, pretty fun. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Rittland. Until we divorce again, happy trails to you.